Welcome to Don't Shuck It Up, the podcast where we help students and families navigate the wild journey of the college search and applying to colleges without breaking a sweat. I'm your host, Chuck, and today I am talking about international students applying to go to college in the United States. Now, I have worked in admissions and higher education and college consulting total now for about 25 years. And there's one group that I do not have a ton of experience with, which is helping international students applying to college to go to the United States. I know some information, but I don't have all the details. So I wanted to bring in an expert and one of my dear friends. So please welcome to the show, John C., who is an independent educational consultant in Manila, Philippines, and he is with Universitas College Consulting. John, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Really happy to be here.
I was excited that we were able to find a time that works between the two time zones. So I'm recording in an evening time, and I'm actually talking to the future when I'm talking to John.
That's right. That's right. You are. So come Super Bowl time, you wanna call me and make sure you ask me who's going to win the Super Bowl. And you could win a lot of money.
Yeah, I wish it worked that way. If that would,
I know.
We would have ruled the world a whole lot of time ago. I guess
That's
the opposite doesn't work. Can I call you and tell you? Maybe, kind of.
No, I don't think so.
Darn it all to heck. Well, John, I wanted to have you on because this is really your job and your life's work right now is helping international students applying to go to college in the United States. So for all my international listeners, which is about 10% of my audience, I think this is going to be really helpful. Save this episode, share it with your friends, and let's help some international students apply to college in the United States. But first, John, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself? Give us an introduction.
Okay, just a little bit. Again, my name is John C. Let's see, I've been doing college counseling since 2014. So I guess you can do the math and figure out how long it was. But I've been an international student in the U.S. twice, actually. Once as a college student between 19 and 19, oh, that guy want all garbled. No, that was back, I say that was back during the Reagan administration between 1983 and 1987. And then once again in 1990 to 1992 as a graduate student. So I've done the whole, this whole thing twice.
Yeah.
And then recently, my daughter herself applied to go to the U.S. Actually, wound up in Canada, actually, but we did go through the process. And actually, that was one of the reasons why I decided to go into college counseling was I realized that there was not a lot of help available here in the Philippines to get professional college counseling for people who don't go to international schools. So that's my niche, basically, your students who don't go into international schools and would like help to be able to apply to the U.S. And I've been fortunate and I've been able to help quite a few people over the past 10 or 12 years.
Well, I think what your story is from you being an international student to helping your student go through the process and the dozens upon dozens of students that you've helped navigate through applying to American colleges. And I think the other thing that people don't realize is that as an independent educational consultant located outside of the United States, you're still obligated to tour colleges. So you just got done with a mega tour of colleges throughout the Midwest and the East Coast, and you were all over the place.
That's true. This summer, I was away from here. I was actually traveling in the United States for about 8 weeks during the summer in June and July, and was able to go to and visit about 40. I can't believe that's a real thing. 40 colleges in Texas, Iowa, I'm going to say New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Ohio. So I was very fortunate, and I was able to get that together.
So you had the opportunity to tour a bunch of schools here in the United States, and I think that brings a unique perspective. Also, you and I have been able to attend conferences together in the United States and have been roommates for some of those. So you're not just...
Yeah, I was going to say, we're actually roommates,
Yeah, but I want to point out that you're just not some random person in a country who says I can help
No.
kids apply to college in the United States. And I always tell students, when you are looking for help, regardless as to if you're in the United States or in your outside of the United States, find someone who is an experienced, ethical college counselor who can help you navigate this process, because there's a
I
lot
agree.
going on, and I want to make sure that people are getting the right information and the right resources. So,
Yeah, you wouldn't want to go to someone who isn't qualified if you need medical help, would you?
no. Oh, please no.
Please no. Might
I
be cheaper, but you don't want to do that.
yeah, I
But
mean,
yeah.
yeah, you know, welcome to the United States. Anyway, so I guess let's start at the very beginning. When do you recommend international students start thinking about applying to colleges or even looking at colleges in the United States or outside of their home country?
I usually recommend, and it's usually the parents who come to me with this and said, "Oh, how soon can you get started?" I always say when the student becomes interested in, in doing the process, because it's very important for me is that the student leads the process,
Yeah.
not me, not the parent. So it's always when the student is interested. Ideally, before the senior year, ideally by junior year, that should already hopefully get going. Ideally, I've worked with students who have. I remember a student who was already interested as early as 10th grade, and so I started with her that early. And the latest I actually had somebody come in was Christmas of the senior year.
Oh,
That was not fun, but it was but we did get it, and but he ended up going to a really good place, and he loved it, and he just graduated last May. I think it was May, yeah, May 25, and graduated top of his class. So it did work out. I think what happened with that was he was applying early decision somewhere competitive, didn't get in, all of a sudden panicked. So what am I going to do now? And fortunately, his mom had my info.
I was saying, came to you for Plan B, which is oftentimes also when people reach out to us as independent educational consultants, is Plan A didn't work. We need help figuring out Plan
Yeah,
B.
exactly.
And that's totally fine.
Exactly.
So, what are some things that parents and students should know as they start this application process, thinking about going to school in the United States?
I think one very important thing to think about is why, right? Why do you want to go? And we all know that college in the United States is not cheap. It's much cheaper to go here.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of them, it's honestly, for a lot of them, it's like a feather in your cap. It was kind of
Yep.
like, oh, the motivation seems to be, oh, I want my friends to know that my child goes to college overseas, blah blah blah, and all the rest of it. So, but I think eventually, when they do come to me, it may start out that way, but hopefully, it evolves into a situation where they're thinking about, or we're being a little bit more deliberate about thinking about where they want to go and where they want to apply and stuff like that.
I guess one thing I would wonder is, so let's say a kid says, yep, I want to go to college in the United States. Is going to college in the United States right for everyone? So let's take, in consideration academic fit, social fit, and financial fit. So academically, is going to college in the United States the best fit for every kid?
I don't even say, nothing is the right fit for every kid, right? So that's, by definition, that's already out of the equation, as it were. Because the academic fit, yeah, I mean, if the kid's interested, that's always a good thing. What I've found is that it's not so much academic fit. That's kind of like the easy part. The financial fit is the big issue. As a matter of fact, when I first see a student or see a client, the first thing I ask them is, well, what's your citizenship status? Are you a U.S. citizen, or are you a Filipino citizen, or non-U.S. citizen? Because I work a lot with kids who carry U.S. passports, but were born in the United States, but were educated here in the Philippines. So they're culturally Filipino, but they carry U.S. passport. The 10th grader I was talking about a few minutes ago, was in that situation. She was carrying a U.S. passport. So that's one of the first things I ask. And the second thing I ask is, it's an awkward question to ask because, we just met. You don't know me from Adam.
Right.
But I have to ask about the money. I have to ask, what's your budget? What do you bring to the party? What are you bringing to the table? And sometimes they'll say, oh, I think, there's a lot of that hemming and hawing. And then they'll say, oh, I think I can put 20,000 or the equivalent in Philippine pesos.
Right.
That, per year. And I'm like, okay, 20,000. Or sometimes they'll say, I really can't afford almost anything. And then it gets rough. Then I have to ask them, is there any special I should know about your background, for instance? Are you a particularly strong athlete? Did you make the math? Yeah, something really, really special.
Right.
And what are your grades like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And unfortunately, 8 times out of 10, if the good student comes to me with not enough money in the budget, it's just not going to happen. So what happens is that I just tell them, I'm sorry, but I mean, you and I can try this, but I can already tell you that it's probably not going to happen. So I usually don't take them on because I don't want to take their money, as it were, knowing in the back of my mind that it isn't going to happen. I don't think that's fair to anyone. So, yeah.
And I think that's a really strong point, and I really want international students to understand that.
Yes.
Is that, yes, there are some colleges in the United States that provide really heavy, strong financial aid and scholarships for international students, but those are few and far between, and those are very difficult to get. The equivalent would be a U.S. student getting a full ride to a college or university, which is also very impossible to get and really challenging. Go ahead.
I would even argue it's harder for an international student to get a full ride than it is for a U.S. student, because a lot of institutions that do pledge to meet full need for all incoming students a lot of them are need blind to domestic applicants, but are need aware.
Correct.
For international students. And I want to make sure that your audience understands the difference between need aware and need blind. I think you did an episode on financial aid, so they should know it. But
let's rehatch it. Yeah. So need blind means that the college is reading your admissions application without any viewing of your financial aid application or financial circumstance. So that's need blind. And there are a large chunk of colleges in the United States that are need blind for American domestic students. Need aware means that as they read the college application, they are also looking at the financial aid application. And even if you're an international student, you're going to have to fill out some kind of a financial aid application. Usually it's an institutional financial aid application or the CSS profile. And
correct.
They're going to look at that and they're going to go, oh, this is a great academic student, top of their class, really doing outstanding things in their country. Oh, but they have no money to be able to come over to the United States. And some colleges just kind of go, we can't do that. We can't financially support a kid through tuition, room, board fees, and then not to mention travel and extraneous fees that students don't even think about. So that's the difference between need blind.
Travel isn't covered.
Right.
Yeah, travel usually isn't covered. But yes, that's true. But the thing is that I've been told, and I've actually spoken to university reps from places that do pledge to meet full need for all students admitted, how much more difficult it is for international students if they have high need. And he basically said it really narrows the funnel.
Yeah.
And I think the word he used was, or the phrase he used, this kid had better be able to walk on water.
Yep.
And that's maybe a little humorous and a little bit, but he said, this kid had better be able to walk on water.
Well, it's true. And even when I was assisting with some international application reads when I was an admissions counselor, one of the stats that we looked at was ability to fund. And for some students, if their funds available were below a certain level, they were put in a different pile. And yes, they still got read and we still looked to see if they were admissible. But if you could show, and international students have to show a lot more bank information, they have to really prove, they can't just say, yep, I can afford 40,000 USD. They have to show that they can afford 40,000 USD.
Correct. Correct.
So with your application is also going to come financial statements to show that you can do it.
Yes.
And then we on the admission side would look at that and kind of verify to be like, yep, they can pay. It does make logical sense. Conversion rates are horrible. And then that would be part of our decision. And I hated doing that, but we had very limited funds for international students, and we want to try to bring in as many international students as possible. And sometimes spreading that money out a bit more allowed us to help more students to come versus giving more full pay or full ride, however you want to define it, scholarships to internationals.
Right. That's right. And I can understand why that is. And I think people have to understand that. I think that what I always like to do is say to people, a lot of U.S. colleges will give you a discount. I call that a discount, and that's what it is. It's a discount. It's a discount on their tuition, but it really is. I mean, it's, a discount, but can you still afford it?
Right.
I think I had he wasn't my student, because if he were, I wouldn't have advised him to do this. But somebody, I don't know, where did I hear it? I think it must be some kind of Facebook post or something, where this boy had applied and had gotten into X university. I'm not going to say the name. I almost said the name of the university. And said, okay, and the student got a $30,000 merit scholarship, which is very, very generous.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, he couldn't cover the rest of it. And so he came out and said, where can I try to find this missing chunk? And I replied and I said, unfortunately, I don't think if I were your counselor, if you had come to me, I wouldn't have suggested you apply to this university, because they'll admit you, they'll give you a nice discount, but that's it.
Yep.
And it might not be enough for you to be able to afford to, which is one of the reasons why I always ask. The first things I ask is, what's your budget? Because that's a really key part of it. I also asked the citizenship status, because that then, if you're a U.S. citizen or a U.S. passport holder, I can work with a lot less.
Yeah.
We can make that happen. Like the student who I talked about, again, that student, the one who was carrying his passport, she came to me and said 10,000. Now, normally I would have said, but then, oh, you carry a U.S. passport? Oh, okay. And she was a very, very good student. So I said, people might like you. I mean, let's see what happens.
Absolutely, and that is true. So if you are outside of the United States, if you hold a U.S. passport or dual citizenship with the United States, you still are applying as a U.S. citizen or dual citizen.
Correct.
But you are still read by international admissions because you are attending a school outside of the United States. So that's kind of a quirky group. They're like, okay, well, I'm technically a U.S. citizen, but I have not gone to high school in the United States, or I'm currently, maybe your parents are traveling and you're spending your junior and senior year in another country. You still are technically applying as a U.S. citizen, but you are going to be read by the international admissions counselors because your high school is outside of the United States. It's a weird conundrum.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it just opens up that the vista of internet, of aid opportunities, just widens considerably if you're a U.S. passport holder.
Yep.
If you're not, then, it becomes very narrow, as it were.
Yep. So how do you help students figure out where they should apply? Obviously, finances are a key. I get contacted constantly on TikTok, Reddit, Instagram, all of my social medias by international students. And I seem to see that they are always asking me about the same 25 colleges over and over and over and over and over again. So
and over
again. So how do you help students find colleges? Because really, what would you say, John? The vast majority of American colleges have international students. I would say at least half, if not more than half, have international students.
I think more than half. Yeah, considerably more than half. So how do I help them? I have to ask them, first of all, obviously the money, but then I also ask them, what's your what are you majoring in? Or what are you thinking of studying? Um, and sometimes they'll say, I don't know yet, and the parents will go, I don't know if I should send him to the US if he doesn't know what to study. And my reply would be, that's perfect. You don't know what you want to study. The United States is perfect for you. And the students and the parents are look at me funny when I say that. But I know it's true.
Yes.
Yes, the US does an exemplary job of helping students find their passion, as it were, or their academic interest, which might not be apparent to them when they're in high school.
Correct.
So I asked if there are any geographic limitations, or sometimes they'll come right out and say it. It has to be in this part because the auntie lives here or the sister lives here, that sort of thing. But it's funny. Sometimes I can kind of like, okay, and then I'll sneak a few, universities. I'll give you a funny example. I had a student a couple of years, something about 2 or 3 years ago already. He was all Chicago. He says that nowhere outside of Chicago. You know where he ended up going to school? Marquette.
Oh,
okay, not Chicago. So apparently, sometimes you can look at it.
man.
Maybe we look
Now,
at this, maybe we look at that.
To be fair, that
eventually,
Marquette University is only 90 miles north of Chicago, so it's not like he got
exactly. But he said Chicago only.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you're right. But sometimes I can convince them to look a little bit further afield, respecting the fact that they do have a geographic preference. But sometimes I also try to,
part of it is not just geographic preference, but it's what they're familiar with. So oftentimes international students have come to visit the United States for vacation, and they've gone to the big three, the three largest cities of the United States, New York, LA, and Chicago, which all of those have great colleges in them and around them, but like the weather and the vibe are very different between those three cities. If students are coming from if students are coming from a really large city around the world,
like Manila,
New York City is going to look close in size. And I don't think a lot of international students understand that beyond the big three, the cities in the United States get very small, very fast. Like, we don't have ginormous cities like other countries do because the United States has not been around for thousands of years. So we don't have huge cities. And I think it's really hard to convince students, for me it has been, to look beyond those big three cities. They always say, well, I have to go to college in New York, Chicago, LA, or if they speak Spanish, because I speak Spanish, so I work with Spanish-speaking kids, they'll say Miami. Like, okay, so I get four options: New York, Chicago, LA, or Miami. How do you help students? You've been all throughout the United States in your travels and throughout your college experience as well. How do you help international students explore places that they haven't heard of?
It's not easy. And for me, our big cities here would be New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Boston. Apparently, they all want those cities. And I'd be happy if they were to look at Chicago. But I try, to tell them, hey, for your particular major, this might be a good fit. I had a student come to me for architecture. He wanted to study architecture, and I said to him, the most interesting architecture program I've seen is at Kansas State University in Manhattan, Kansas.
Yeah.
And it's obviously very, very different from the Philippines, from Manila, because Manhattan's a small town. And we're talking Kansas, by the way, not Manhattan, New York.
Right.
Although I joked with I joked with the student, and I said, well, at least you can tell your students, you can tell your friends you go to school in Manhattan.
And Manhattan, Kansas is almost near the exact center of the United States. So we're talking literally middle of the country.
Yeah, exactly. So for us, it's more like sometimes it's hard to convince some people. I had a student this last year who had to be California, and I tried to make him look at, hey, why don't you look at Colorado or Oregon, so he didn't make an application to Colorado. I think he did it just to humor me. But but ironically enough, he decided to stay local. But after all that, so it's hard. It's not easy, but I try to tell them that it's not like it's this horror. Most people think that it's the coast, and all of a sudden there's this terra incognita, the middle market, and they're afraid of people. That people are sometimes worried, like, oh, what do the people like there? But because people in the West Coast, they seem to be okay with Asians. If I go to St. Louis, or if I go to, by the way, I had a student who didn't know where St. Louis was, um, um, and um, and he was worried, and I can sort of understand. You've never been there, but here's a trick that I have found. Here's a trick that I found. Maybe I'll share it with you and your listeners. Is that I have found some cities in the Midwest that are particularly attractive, I think, to students in general, and two of them, Des Moines, Iowa,
No.
and Omaha, Nebraska, are very attractive. Why? I find for them is that they have a a lot of corporate headquarters and corporate branch offices in those areas, and there's not a lot of competition school-wise for internships. For example, in Omaha, really almost the only game in town is Creighton University, right? And this is where I sent that kid who came to me in Christmas. He ended up going to Creighton. He loved it, and is now working in Omaha. But he was able to get some really, really outstanding internships.
Yeah.
Another one that I just found out about is Des Moines. Is that same situation? Drake University is pretty much the only game in town, so you have no competition. A lot. You mean a lot of places will go. Oh, New York has a lot of New York has Silicon Valley has a lot of places where you can get internships. Hey, but guess what? You've got a lot of competition. You've got a lot of schools competing with you. You've got NYU, you've got Columbia, you've got Pace out in New York City, and then in Silicon Valley, you've got Stanford, you've got Santa Clara, you've got anyway, the list goes on and on. So sometimes maybe think about Omaha, Nebraska.
Well,
and it's not so bad. I mean, go and visit.
To be honest, John, that's not just international students. I have the same issue with Americans who forget that the Midwest exists. And so in Omaha, yes, you have Creighton. We also have to shout out to University of Nebraska at Omaha.
Absolutely.
There's one other school. And then there's some other ones nearby, University of Nebraska-Lincoln and Nebraska Wesleyan. But in the Midwest, like, I have to remind students that Minnesota is a state and that there are colleges in Minnesota that would love to have them. In fact, University of Minnesota Twin Cities is a Big Ten, and so you can get a Big Ten experience in an area where you don't have a ton of other students competing with you. And I think because even here in the United States, the Midwest is deemed the flyover country, where, you go from one coast to the other. As someone who has lived in the Midwest my entire life, this is one of the most affordable places to go to college. This is one of the friendliest places to go to college. And if you really want to experience America, you're going to get all 4 seasons. You're going to be able to see everything from cities to farmland. You're going to be able to explore the outdoors if you've never, gone hiking or, done outdoor activities. We have near the Great Lakes, lots of water. So I wish more students, not just internationals, but also Americans, would consider the Midwest.
I had actually heard of something called Midwestern Nice.
Oh, yes.
That is a real thing. That is a real thing. And I think, like, for instance, I was able to visit Iowa, and they paid for my visit. I just had to fly in and fly out, but I didn't ask for them to sponsor me. I was just asking them. I came to them asking, oh, what's the right order? I wanted to see schools in Iowa. And then they said, oh, we'll take care of it. And they said, oh, we'll host you. We'll take care of everything. Food, hotel, transportation. In the 4 days you'll be here. You just get yourself in and out. That's fine. I was like, that I'm by myself. There's not like 5 of us or something. It's not like, so yeah, we know. It's like, oh my gosh. I was stunned. And so apparently they said, yeah, Midwestern Nice is a thing. And it is a thing. And I think a lot of people would be very pleasantly surprised at that.
Yeah, so I'd always encourage students to, you can search up visit and then put whatever city and state, and you'll get the visitor's guide that pops up. and it'll show you what's to do, what's the population, sports, music, outdoor activities, food scene. So if you've never heard of a city in a certain city or state, do visit, and then whatever city, state, and look up the visitor's guide and see what's going on that way. Also, YouTube is a great resource to be able to check out, visit certain cities. There's lots of people that document their trips to certain parts of the country. So if students are not aware of these places, and also make sure you're checking what's it like in the different seasons. For those of my listeners in the Southern Hemisphere, remember that most students here in the States go to college. In the Northern Hemisphere, it's winter. So you want to make sure you know, what is the winter experience going to be like where you're going to college in the United States.
It's true.
So I guess thinking about, once students figure out where they want to apply, how is the application process itself different for an international non-U.S. citizen versus an American citizen?
Almost no difference. It's the same. You gotta fill in the same. Gotta do Common App. That's always going to be there, if you like it or not. You still have to do it. I think the only extra piece is to demonstrate English proficiency.
Yeah,
and that's always a tricky little piece, but not. Coming from the Philippines, and dealing with Philippine graduates at Philippine high schools, what I found is that they are willing to accept the fact that the medium of instruction in this country is English.
Yes.
And so they're willing to accept that and say, okay, we'll waive your need to prove English proficiency. Out of the many students I've helped, I've never had a single one. Well, I've only had a single one have to take the TOEFL.
Oh, good.
And it was because he was applying to a state university, and that state, which I will not mention, has some pretty strange English proficiency requirements, let me tell you. And I will, maybe we'll talk about it offline, but usually the problem sometimes with the state universities, because they are legislated.
Correct.
To say, oh, I'm sorry, it's not up to us. It's really, but in private school, usually they'll say, oh yeah, you're cool.
Yeah, and that's a really excellent point. As long as your educational language is English, colleges will waive that English proficiency. It's an automatic requirement for all international students, but once the college sees that you attend school in English, that will get waived. Now, for my students who are listening that go to high school not in English as your primary language, you will need to submit some type of proficiency exam. Different colleges will ask for different things. Some will say SAT, ACT, IELTS, TOEFL. Some are accepting Duolingo. There's lots of different ways you can do it. You need to check with the international admissions page for that college and figure out what type of English proficiency they'll do.
Correct.
A lot of colleges also now are requiring interviews for some of those students, because in some countries, there's kids that are cheating on their English proficiency tests. So now that they have to do an interview or submit a video recording to verify their English proficiency.
That always seemed strange to me. That you would cheat on an English proficiency test, because if you struggle with English, maybe going to America isn't for you. Going to college in America, because it doesn't get any easier when you're in the classroom. This is not something you want to cheat on. If you don't know it, or you don't know it well enough, maybe,
I will tell you, we had when I worked in admissions, this was a case that we had to deal with about 15 years ago. A kid came from a country that the primary language was not English for education, and came to the institution I was working at, and clearly from day one did not understand English. Like, it was like, okay. And we went back to the admissions record and we said, we screw up? Did we admit someone that's not supposed to be admitted? And the files showed that the kid should have been able to speak, read, and write English, at least at a basic level, to be able to understand what was going on for our standards.
In the class.
And this kid we found out later on, the kid had cheated and had somebody else take the test for them. And so we started implementing video interviews for certain countries where we were concerned. We're like, okay, when you're going to college at a small liberal arts college where it is heavy reading, heavy writing, and heavy speaking, you need to have not just decent English capability, you need to have some pretty strong English capability. I
That's right.
struggled, and English is my native language. I struggled at that college. Uh, That's the hard part.
Yeah.
What about the timeline? Is the timeline any different really for international students?
Not that much. I mean, I'd like to see them by their junior year, if not earlier. It would be great. That way we have, we have that run up. We have the summer of the junior year to figure out what we want to do that junior year. I can encourage them to go and visit the universities, not just the universities that they may be interested in applying to. But that's always a little bit of a struggle to get them to even think about going, because a lot of them think, "Oh, it's so expensive." I'm
Yes.
thinking, you're about to spend $50,000 a year, is it? Maybe.
Yep.
Let's just put that around number. That's $200,000 over 4 years, and you can't be bothered to spend maybe a few thousand to go visit. It's like you're buying a brand new car without test driving it. Doesn't make any sense,
Yep.
right? You need to see it, but some people say, "Oh, I don't have the time." Blah blah blah. It's like, no. I mean, it's hard to argue, right? I mean, you can't tell people what to do. At the same time, it's a crucial but part of it, and it actually helps your application for schools that track demonstrated interest, right? You and I know this, and can you imagine what kind of impact it would be for a student coming from the Philippines going all the way to the United States to visit a particular college? Can you imagine what that college will think about? Oh, this kid must really be interested in us,
Yeah.
because he came all the way out here to see us. So that's what I sometimes tell them, is that it might really help you for a school that tracks demonstrated interest, that something like that would happen. It would come
Absolutely.
all the way.
When I worked in admissions at various colleges, public and private, if we ever got word that a student and their family was visiting from another country, I didn't care where, if it was Mexico or Canada, which is not that far away, or somewhere like, the Southeast Pacific or whatever. Like we were, holy cow, this kid actually is interested. Because I'll be honest, for students and families, like there were years that the amount of international applications that we received were at or above the amount of American applications we received in 1 year. So we're getting a lot of international applications, and we don't know from the admission standpoint how serious some of those students are. Now, I don't want everyone to book a flight tomorrow and go visit all of their colleges and hope that Harvard, Yale, and Princeton are going to notice. But if you're in communication with the college and they say, hey, if you have a chance to come visit us, we'd love to host you, your answer should be yes. Let's find a way to make that work.
Yes, let's do this. Let's do this. I had a student a number of years ago, first time to the Midwest. I ended up going to a small Wisconsin college, but when they visited, so they got wind of the admissions office got a wind of this student coming all the way from the Philippines to visit them. He actually told the president of the university, and the president came down to say hello. And it blew away my family. They said, like, "Oh my gosh, here's a guy who came in to say hello." And eventually they enrolled there because they said, the mother came to me and said, "I just had this impression that they would take care of my daughter. It's not just, oh yeah, if she's a student, I leave her there, fine."
Right.
That they would take care of her, that they would make sure that she would be okay. So she left there, even though she had no relatives within 100 miles, of that place. She was like, "I just feel that my kid would be safe here."
Yeah.
And they would take care of her. That was it. They would care for her. It wouldn't be just, a student, a number.
Right.
At the end of it,
And I bet that happens at more colleges than what people think. I think if you're...
Yes, I think so. Yeah. Especially the smaller ones, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you can't go visit in person, though, do you recommend that students reach out and either do a virtual visit or connect with their admissions counselor?
I do that. Nobody ever takes me up on it. The virtual visit might, as a matter, but as far as connecting with the admissions officer, it was funny, but it happened just about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I had a student who was really interested in this small college in Ohio. I'm just gonna say that. And I had the rep and she came on, and we had a Zoom call. We had a very nice Zoom call. The parent asked all the questions she wanted. And it was a lot of the questions was, wait a minute, you asked me those questions. And I guess she needed to hear it from somebody who was actually there, to hear it straight from the horse's mouth, as it were. But this is one of the colleges I visited over the summer. I visited and I looked around and I said, oh, hey, I have a kid right for you. I have exactly the kid that's for you. Would be a perfect fit for this place. But sometimes when I visit colleges and I see them and I go like, a kid comes to mind, even almost immediately, oh, Bobby would love this, or Sarah would love this, or something like that. I think this would be a good place for him or her.
Yeah. And so, I also think that parents and students need to be aware that American schools are traveling internationally again, maybe not as extensive as they did prior to COVID, but there are colleges back on the road. And I think a lot of students that I've talked to in other countries said, oh, I've never heard of that college, but they're coming to my high school, or they're visiting my area and they're doing a college fair. Should I go visit? What do you tell your students if there are reps?
I tell them definitely go.
Yeah,
definitely go. Definitely say hello. Even if it's a school that you might not be that interested in, they came a long way. I'll tell you. Sorry, I don't mean to. I'll tell you a funny story. This is in 2022, and I had a couple of college reps come, and they come to the house. They're right out. We were in the dining room at the store, and so we were having dinner, and I told my families, hey, come by and say hello. Okay. They came by, and then all of a sudden everybody was sitting at the table having dinner, and my wife was like, we don't have the food to feed all these people. But apparently, I don't know, apparently we did. And it was a great time because everybody was talking and laughing, and they were asking all kinds of questions. And yeah, they might not have enrolled. As a matter of fact, I think the kid that eventually went to Marquette came here, and Marquette wasn't here. But the fact that he was able to come and visit and talk to, had a lot of his questions answered, had a lot of his, things like that. And it was a great time. It was lots of fun. And even though it got scary for us, like, oh, what are we going to feed all these people? My wife was like, how? I didn't know you invited so many people. I didn't invite them. I just told them to come by and say hello. And apparently the hellos got really interesting, and they sat down and they decided to help themselves. And like, oh my God. But still.
It always works. So
somehow it worked out.
Oh yeah. I've got one more question, and then we'll turn to your soapbox time. How do you feel about international students applying as early decision? Now, early decision, for those internationals that are not aware, is the binding application where you can only apply really to one place, early decision. If you are admitted, you basically, that's where you're going. And the college typically will work their hardest to make it work financially for that student. So how do you feel about students internationally who want to apply early decision?
I think it can work for some students, especially those who have no financial issues. But even if they do, sometimes it's not a bad option, because again, as you said, a lot of the colleges will try to make it it can be a boost to your application chance. I do ask students if they want to do this. Is there a school that they want to? Or I will think maybe we apply early decision here, but I don't think I've ever had anyone apply early decision, because they're always like, really? I have to, all of a sudden they get cold feet when they realize I have to go there. And somehow that doesn't, they get all nervous about it. But they do. I try to tell them that it's not a bad idea. Actually, my own niece applied early decision to a very Big Ten school. It's very competitive to get into. And she got in. And I said, well, yeah, if you really want to go there. And I said, I think applying early decision is a great idea. And she did, and she got in, and she was happy, And so that works. It can work. I think it works for some students, not for all, but
it can. But the students really need to be interested. I tell my students that applying early decision is basically requesting to get the tattoo of the college. So you're going to be connected to this thing, this college or university, for the rest of your life, just like getting a tattoo. So Do you love it enough that you would potentially get a tattoo of it if you could? Then you should maybe think about applying early decision.
I had an admissions rep once told this was very early in my career, and I asked them, how much does early decision really help as far as your chance of getting in are concerned? And he put it in an interesting way. He said, well, it heals the sick, but it doesn't raise the dead. And what it means is that if you're competitive, sure, it'll help you. But if you weren't competitive to begin with, you shot your shot for nothing. You know, if you're a 3.5 student and you're applying to Stanford and you're thinking, well, if I apply early decision, maybe I can get in.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't work that way, hon.
Probably not.
But I think if you're like, 3.5 and you want to go to, 3.5, 3.7, and you really, really interested in going to, say, Santa Clara or something like that, and you can pay because Santa Clara is not very generous with financial aid to international students. They'll, yeah, go right ahead. I think if you really want to go, because that's basically you're pushing all your chips to the middle of the table, basically saying, yeah, so university loves it because obviously they have a guaranteed admission, a guaranteed seat, as it were.
Yep.
If they take you, you have to come and fill their seats. And you and I both know that university admissions is fill those seats, fill those beds.
Yep.
Those are very important. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So the more sure things they have, the better. And our friends in the admissions office, they sleep better if they know that they have a number of students in the bag already, as it were, heading into the regular decision process. So yeah, I mean, for some people, it would be great.
All right, John, it is the time for your soapbox, and I always love to give all my guests the time to share. If there's advice that you could give every international parent or international student listening to this podcast or watching on YouTube, what would you what's your parting words of wisdom?
I've got a lot of them, but it's only an hour. I only have an hour, not even that. Okay, let's start the first one. The most important one is don't get hung up on the name schools, the 20 or 25 schools that everybody wants to know about. By that, I mean Ivy League, Stanford, MIT. For us here, it's the UCs, the University of California, UCLA, Berkeley, NYU, to some extent, Boston University. A lot of these places that are very competitive, and they're all, everybody wants to know how to get into those places. And I would say don't get hung up on them. There's a lot of different universities out there. You should be going into this process asking, what can this school do for me? What's the fit?
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, I always say, if you can't articulate that fit, do you expect the university to do that for you? No, you have to be the one to articulate that. You got to know, why is this school right for me? Right? So that takes unfortunately, that takes a lot of thinking, a lot of reflection. And that's why that leads me to point number 2, which is seek help. Go to people like Chuck, go to people like me. We are qualifying to do this. We've been doing this for Chuck used to have dark hair, a full head of dark, wavy hair before he got into this. And he and I are both passionate about helping students find the right college fit. Nothing excites me more, or it thrills me more, than when a student comes and they say, oh, sorry, another story. Pardon me. But I had a student, he wasn't an especially strong student, but he ended up going to this university in Pennsylvania, in rural Pennsylvania. And then I contacted him maybe about a year later, just say, hey, how are you doing? And then he said, I'm doing very well, thank you. And I said, are you still going to study history? Because that's what he was going to do. He said, no, I've decided I want to study economics. I said, oh, that's interesting. And I said, you know that economics, that comes with a lot of math. You know that, right? And math was not his strong suit. Said, yeah, but this is the thing. I met this professor and he taught me math and it just made sense. All of a sudden the light just went on my head. And it's all his years in high school, I never really kind of got it. But all of a sudden, the way he told it to me or the way he taught it to me, he literally said, the light went on in my head. And all of a sudden, I love math. And I was like, I almost fell my, because I told his former history teacher, oh, so-and-so now loves math. Because I think we started, and he was like, really? And he was, but yeah, for me, I hear stories like that. I love that when I hear a story about a student getting a great job after graduation. I love that when I hear about a student getting, graduating top of his class, graduating summa cum laude. I love it because that means we did our job, that sort of thing. I don't brag about or don't talk about, oh, my student got into Harvard or Yale or do something first, and then I'll brag about it.
Yeah,
that's the thing. So, but definitely reach out, to me and to Chuck and to people who are qualified to do this. And that's a very important point too, is be careful who you get your advice from.
Right.
Don't rely on your aunt so-and-so who happens to live in LA and says, hey, this is a great school, you should apply here. You should apply in UCLA on a 3.5. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's super helpful. Yeah, I totally agree with you with all those points, because I see too many students that are saying, well, I saw on TikTok that if I do this, I'm going to be able to get into XYZ college. And I said, you don't know why that might have worked for the student that you saw, but it may not work for you. The situation might be completely different. So you can't just repeat what another student did and it magically works for you. Each kid is different. Each application is unique. And so make sure that you're getting the correct information from a reliable source so that you're making the smart decisions. John, thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure to have you. John C. from Universitas College Counseling in Manila, Philippines. I appreciate you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a real pleasure personally to see you again, my old friend, and to talk. We haven't done that in a while, but I
was going to say,
thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. We could probably talk for another 2 hours, but people would eventually get bored. So let's hope to have a part 2. So thank you all to the listeners for paying attention for this episode on the podcast and on the YouTube channel. Please comment if you have questions about anything that myself or John has talked about. That could be information for us to create episode 2.0 for international admissions. We'd love to hear from you. I will also put John's contact information in the show notes if you'd like to reach out to John and ask him questions directly. Of course, you can also check out his website for more information as well. John, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate everything that you are doing in Manila. You are changing kids' lives over there every day, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your morning, my evening, to chat with me.
Isn't that funny?
It's great. I love it. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today, but fear not, we will be back next week with more tips and tricks to help you conquer the application process like a boss. Until then, remember, don't chuck it up.